No doubt I'm a little bit late to the punch with this one, but here's a build that I've been working on for around about a week now, and I think it's pretty much perfected for Lepic. If you want to absolutely destroy bosses, have a lot of fun nuking them, doing the most damage you possibly can, probably the highest damage in the game, as well as being able to get an alternative build that I'll put together, which I usually run when I'm going through my missions, or taking on kind of normal ads and such. This build is absolutely amazing, a lot of fun to use, and absolutely decimates every single thing within your path. As you can see from the footage in the background, even the toughest bosses are no trouble with this build, and this time I went into a Frostwalker battle and we managed to have another Lepic with us. Just with the two of us, we almost managed to one-phase it, which is quite ridiculous considering how tough this battle usually is. And I think if there was three of us, we would have probably been able to take it down before it even went into its second phase, having to take out the legs and such. Now the first thing I'm going to get out of the way, there are a few things that you should always know. One thing is going to be there's a rotation to it. So as we see on the Pyro boss, you're going to go into your weapon swap, then you're going to activate your overclock, and thirdly, you're going to activate overkill and dodge roll in order to kind of animation cancel and cast it a lot faster. One thing you also want to remember is aim for the weak spot of whatever enemy you're going for, especially on those Colossus of course. On this one we've absolutely nuked it, it's perfect, but the second one I'm going to show you when it goes completely wrong, and all you're going to do if you miss all of the weak spots is get the enemy to enrage and make your whole team annoyed at you, or just make things a lot harder if you're doing solo bosses and such. Now, I have not upgraded my weapons whatsoever because I've changed them around so many times, and there's going to be an update soon, buffing a few of them, so I think this will now be the ideal setup. So we're going to be using Enduring Legacy when we're trying to focus fire and absolutely smash things to pieces. This one's going to be great for that. Secondly, Thunder Cage, that's going to be our weapon that we swap to when we want our skill damage and when we're mobbing. And thirdly, you're going to want any kind of precision tool. This one I've gone with Wave of Light, but if you didn't like that, a sniper rifle would also work out perfect. For our Enduring Legacy, I really like to boost it up with firearm critical hit rate, a little bit of weak point damage, fire critical damage, and the one I'm missing, you're going to want firearm attack power up as well. Now over to a special, this one's really cool, and like I said, they should be updating this, so I think this gun will be one of the most powerful in the game, and what you're going to get with this is going to be its unique ability, craftsmanship, and this causes quenching. Whenever you're hitting an enemy that's burned, it's going to increase your firearm attack and apply the buff to your attack. It just basically means when you're hitting something that's on fire, you're going to get a nice bit of extra damage from this, and it works absolutely amazing with this build, so make sure you're chucking your grenades out after they've been overclocked in order to get the most to your single target. Over to our Thunder Cage, just an absolute monster, and for this one we've got firearm critical damage, firearm attack, rounds per magazine, and the one I'm missing off of it is going to be critical attack rate. This one comes with the unique ability of overcharge. It's going to do a nice AoE whenever you're taking out your ads and your enemies, kind of the smaller ones most times, and this one's absolutely amazing for taking on missions and trying to clear through them very fast. Lastly, I'm going to be using Wave of Light, but like I said, pick your own one here. I'm using this for a bit of precision. This has pretty much everything I want on it for those weak spots on the Colossus. The only thing we're missing, where it's got the chill, you probably want to take that off and put on the one that's going to boost your firearm attack. For this one's unique, you get a bit of a strange one for this. It's called Splendor, and a unique ability after reloading grants Solar Halo, where you're almost guaranteed a kind of critical hit, and then upon hitting the same enemy you can apply Lunar Halo this time, which is going to weaken their regeneration. I could see this being really good on certain bosses later on. Hopefully they'll include a few that's got regen, and then this one will be an absolute must. For our weapon setups, like I said, mine is far from perfect. I've not even fully upgraded them yet, but you're going to want Rifling Reinforcement on the Enduring Legacy, Mental Focus, then we're going to have Fire Rate up, and finally we're going to have Fire Enhancement. This one is going to turn it into an absolute beast, and it's a lot of fun to see when you put it together, especially when you're able to put a bit more crit damage and everything into it later on when you start to boost it up with your catalysts and such. I am very much lacking on my weapons because I've upgraded quite a few of them and now have decided not to be using them for certain builds, but this one will definitely do the job of tearing down a single target very nicely. Over to our multi-target, and we've got a Thunder Cage. Again, you're going to want better insight on this one. Fire rate up, because this is actually going to apply and carry over to our overkill skill move, which is where we're going to be getting all of our damage from. On top of this, you're going to be able to boost it up even further with your speed by applying the Sharp Precision Shot. This ultimate is absolutely amazing. Starts off meaning you're a little bit slower with your firepower, however as soon as you start to build it up, your fire rate goes up very nicely. Again, you are going to want to make sure you put on Rifling Reinforcement. This is kind of a must on all of your weapons just to boost your overall attack power. And finally for Wave of Light, very similar, rifling reinforcement, then any kind of crit damage, chuck that all on board, and then you may need to put a little bit of recoil down if you can later on, because that will definitely help it to make things a bit easier with your shots. Now over to our first kind of boss build, you're going to want Firearm Master, so this is going to be for your ultimate Lepic. If you haven't got him, don't worry, just leave this one off, but you will definitely need this if you want to maximise his full damage potential. This is going to be amazing. It's going to give you a little bit of extra range when you're doing your reloads, but the main thing you're going to be using it for is when you're swapping your weapon, you're going to get a nice bit of extra skill power damage. Over to something I will never be able to take off, and that's going to be your mid-air manoeuvring. This is going to make your life easier. Chuck it on, you'll be able to swing through the air and grab things you previously wouldn't be able to hit. Skill Insight, this build very much revolves around your kind of critical hits, so make sure this is boosted as high as possible. Technician is really going to help you out with your skill power damage, as it's also going to mean that those AoE effects tend to tick a little bit harder, and because of how much we're going to be relying on that actual crit damage, you're going to want to put skill concentration in the mix as well. Another nice one, Battle of Stamina, this is going to give you a little bit of extra duration as well as some nice health. Over to Dangerous Ambush, this one's absolutely amazing. I've only started using this. It means you get a nice bit of extra damage to those bosses or enemies when they're not targeting you, and when they're knocked down into that down state, you get a massive amount of damage on them, probably the most you can actually put into a build, so it's well worth having this on. Fire Specialist is a no-brainer, you'll definitely want that to boost your overall damage, as well as Front Lines, and of course its partner, Emergency Measures, as both of these are going to serve to boost both your critical hit rate as well as your critical hit damage. Over to MP Accelerant, this is going to give your skill duration a little bit of a buff, as well as giving you a nice little bit of extra boost to your MP. And lastly, Skill Extension, allowing you to get a lot more out of your actual overkill, and be able to pump out more of those balls of doom to absolutely obliterate your enemies. The skills and their activation times, how long they're on for, will look like this with how we've got it going, and honestly it's just a really nice build to nuke bosses and have a lot of fun with your team or solo in order to get through things as fast as possible. It is however a little bit squishy, so do bear that in mind, and I definitely won't take this into your kind of missions and such, and the fact that you haven't kind of got your extra life anymore with that last passive skill means that this is definitely worth using on those Colossus, but probably not worth using for your standard missions. So for our standard missions, what we're going to use is going to be a slightly different setup, and as you can see the stats down the bottom here are looking much healthier already, and they're much more rounded in order to help us tackle everything in the game. Instead, this time for our Transcendent mod, we're going to be putting on Power Unit Change. I don't see anyone using this, and I think this is one of the best Transcendent mods in the game, although I do think it needs a bit of a buff to its duration. This means you now hit like an absolute truck whenever you're using your overclock, and instead of going into skill power, more so we're going to be trying to hit our enemies very hard with a run and gun style build. Again, we've got our mid-air manoeuvring. Over from here we've also got a nice bit of extra HP because we don't want to be too squishy. Then we've got emergency measures, very similar to before, for a little bit of skill crit and skill crit rate. Time distribution, skill cooldown, max HP again. Fire Specialist in order to boost our overall damage of our skill power. Front Lines once more working hand in hand with our emergency measures, and then a completely different one, we're going to be using HP Collector. This one is really cool if you're trying to stand the fight, and whenever you're taking out those enemies you're going to be able to get yourself a nice bit of HP regen. The more maxed out this is, the more you'll be able to collect that HP at certain intervals. Over from here we're going to chuck on some defense, as you're definitely going to need it at standard times. Then you're going to grab yourself some skill insight, some skill concentration, and finally you're going to have some maximised duration just to help us get a little bit longer on our overclock. When we go over to the skills, now things have changed up a little bit. You're going to be able to get your passive skill of Close Call, which is really nice, allowing you a bit of extra survivability, and of course the main thing that's changed up is going to be your overclock has now changed into Power Unit Change, which gives us a whopping 52% extra damage to our attack power. Lastly, jumping over to your reactor, you're going to want a burning reactor obviously, and the one that I've got on comes with the mounting for the thunder cage. Like I said, we're going to be weapon swapping into that to give us our full potential, and you're going to want to make sure it's got fire skill power boost and tech skill power boost on it, as well as skill critical hit damage and additional skill attack when attacking Colossus. For our last 4-piece, we're going to be using the Slayer set, and the first one we're going to be looking at is going to be our auxiliary power. The main thing you want with this 100% is going to be MP recovery out of combat and max HP. MP recovery out of combat is much better than anyone has ever told me, and actually you only have to be about 4 seconds out of being shot at in order to start your regen up. Very possibly the most important part is going to be the sensor. You're going to want this to have as much MP on it as possible. Hopefully you can get in gold, as well as that, if you can, MP recovery within combat. Over to our memory, and for this one you definitely want MP recovery modifier, and then I haven't been able to get, but if you can, get defense on top of that as well. For the processor, you're going to want to make sure you've got max shield on it, and then any other one of your kind of choosing, maybe some added gold or Kuiper. For me, I've just got the display time on this one. Altogether, this is going to give you the whole Slayer set, giving you general round capacity of 8%, rounds per magazine of 9%, skill cost unfortunately 15% extra, so that's a bit of a negative, but the skill power you get with it is 26.1%, so it's definitely worth having just for that. Also, when defeating enemies inflicted with Tau, which just means whenever you're throwing out your kind of number 3, and grouping everything together in that air effect, you're going to be gathering back some of your MP costs. Ultimately, this is a really nice build, a lot of fun to use. Hopefully that's helped a few of you guys and girls out. There's going to be a load more content away from me. As always, Wolfens Gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.